Okay.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hey, Haris. How are you doing?
Good. Doing very good.
Are you still working from home or are you heading back to the office?
Yes. I mean, my office is at home.
All right. Yeah, so I think today you have three speakers, including yourself. So yes,
Yes.
everyone, Haris is both our host and also speaker today.
Yes.
I'm very excited to see how he introduced himself and also emceeing for this event.
Yes, yeah, I think a couple of the speakers have seen me talk to myself, but we have a bunch of speakers for today. So we have three speakers, including myself. So the first speaker is Zong Han, and he's going to talk about his Flutter app, chat app using Firebase. So that's going to be pretty cool. The second one would be Susie, who's currently in Melbourne, and she is going to talk about internalization because in this world we talk more than one language, not English lah. So she's going to talk about that. And lastly, myself, the last speaker, who's going to talk about the new feature in Flutter, which is, or I would say Dart programming language, which is null safety. Yes.
Yes.
So
Sounds amazing. So it's we hit the time to start. So before that, I would just like to welcome everyone to the Google Developer Space channel and thank you for tuning in to the live stream today. So do make full use of the live chat and also the comment section to ask questions, which Haris will be getting to with the speakers after the end of every session.
all right.
And before we begin, I'd just like to briefly introduce what we do and who we are. So Google Developer Space is a platform for developers such as Haris and then startups from around the region to learn, connect, engage, and be inspired. And as part of the DevRel team, we aim to empower and connect the community to our people, program, network, and technologies, be it an online session like today or in person. And we are very excited to be hosting Flutter Singapore Meetup led by Haris. So thanks, Haris, for bringing such a great line of speakers today. Great line, including yourself.
Thank you. And also, I want to shout out to German. He is the organizer of the Flutter Meetup in Singapore. I mean, without him, we don't have the Flutter Meetup in Singapore also. And also, one thing I want to shout out is also this couple of days is Flutter Day, right? So for those who have joined in, you might have known that we have like a global event, like a hackathon and similar Flutter events that you're going to hear about.
Yeah,
Yes.
awesome. So happy Flutter Day, everyone. And, do give us a shout out on the live chat. Where are you tuning in from? We have speakers dialing in from different countries today as well. So let us know where you are.
All
All
right.
right. Yeah. Without further ado, Haris, I'll pass the stage to you to get things started.
Okay, so let me introduce to our first speaker, and I'm going to do a very cool transition. All right. Do you guys
Hi,
like my
Haris.
transition? Hi, Zong Han.
Hi,
All right.
Haris.
So, Zong Han, give a short introduction about yourself.
Right. My name is Zong Han. Currently, like a year 3 undergraduate at Nanyang Tech. Currently on LOA. But prior to that, I used to be the tech lead of a local edtech startup in Singapore, building education apps for kids. Yeah.
Oh my God, so
we
cool.
use
How
Flutter
young
for
are
our
you? How young are you?
24.
24, and he
24.
has already been a tech lead, guys. So up for grabs.
I mean, if you're the only tech guy in the team, then I guess you're the tech lead.
Right. Oh my God. And now you're going to talk about a real-time chat app, which is, I guess, a lot of features that you're going to talk about. So I'm going to leave it to you. And Zong Han, let's get started.
Right. Thanks. All right. So hi guys. Again, I'm Zong Han, and today I'll be doing like a little sharing on how one might be doing, how one might want to go about building your real-time chat application using Flutter, and with Firebase specifically as our backend. So I've personally developed like a couple of production commercial apps using Flutter, and I've absolutely been floored by how easy it is to build very beautiful and performant apps due to the framework. And this is essentially why I'm here today, like very excited to share the Flutter gospel with you guys. So why are we actually setting real-time chat apps as the context of this sharing? because I feel that like real-time chat apps, right, they pretty much demonstrate almost the entire range of features that modern apps nowadays typically has. And if you're just starting to get your hands dirty with Flutter, I hope that the services, the packages, and the widgets that I'm about to share will actually help you guys out. So besides Flutter, why Firebase, right? So Firebase is essentially like a development platform owned by Google, which provides an entire spectrum of services and tools for modern app development. And the thing about these services is that they're actually very well integrated with Flutter, because Google has actually provided very intuitive and ready-to-use packages for most aspects of Firebase's services. And in fact, Google has invested so much thought and effort, right, into these plugins that there's even a like fancy collective name for them called Flutterfire. And essentially, Flutterfire makes full stack development on Flutter super easy. So these are the touch points that we'll be covering today. And we'll kick things off, the crux of a chat application, implementing like a chat stream and interacting with it. So to make this like live stream of messages happen, right, we're going to be using Firestore. And what Firestore is essentially Firebase's flagship NoSQL document database. And we're going to be using it to store our messages and to integrate this database into our app. You will need to install the Cloud Firestore Dart package. And moving on, the first Dart concept that we will touch on when it comes to working with like real-time data is that of streams. So streams are sort of like asynchronous iterables in the sense that instead of getting the next event when you ask for it, like promises or futures, the stream actually tells you when there's an event, when it's ready, right? And on Flutter, it's extremely easy to create such a stream, especially using the Firestore package, as you can see. So in very little lines of code, right, we have now actually created a stream that provides an array of like the 20 latest message documents from a specific conversation thread with the ID, group chat ID. And now that we've created a stream, right, what can we actually do with this stream? Well, stream builders, right, are widgets on Flutter that you will come to use a lot and love when you're actually working with real-time data. And all you have to do, right, is to actually attach this stream to a stream builder. And whenever there are changes to the snapshots, right, the document snapshots, the stream builder will actually rebuild itself with the latest data automatically by itself. And this is actually key, right, to building a super reactive UI that actually reflects changes in data in real time, which is perfect for our application. So if we look at the code over here, right, it's actually very straightforward. Once you attach the message stream to the stream builder will try to connect to your database. And in the meantime, right, snapshot.has data will be null. So while it's fetching the new documents, there will be a loading spinner. And once it actually fetches, when has data actually is no longer null, then you can process the data and render them accordingly. So this is like a short, the video that I have over here is like a short demo per se. So the list of messages is basically the stream builder rendering like a list of an array of messages. And basically when I click send, right, I'm running a transaction to the database. So it's like separate. But as the database gets updated, right, you can see that the list view gets updated in real time as well, which is pretty cool. Like you can see in very little lines of code, we actually implemented like an actual live stream. And I briefly mentioned about transactions. And one thing that I really love when working with Firestore and on Flutter is the idea of like how easy it is to really write atomic operations that are dependent on the current values of the document. So atomic transactions, right, are basically transactions whereby all operations, right, within the transaction occurs either successfully, all of them successfully, or the entire transaction will fail. And this is exceptionally useful, right, if you want to update a document based on its current value, right? In other words, in the case of concurrent edit, like when you create a transaction and the transaction is reading documents and another client somewhere, right, tries to modify any of the documents that you have read, right, within a transaction, Cloud Firestore will actually retry the transaction with the latest data. And this actually ensures that transactions, right, are run on up-to-date and consistent data, which is super, super useful. Because if you're running like an event or ticketing app, then you wouldn't want like people to oversubscribe, right, to your events, something like that. All right. So this is an example of how run transactions can be written. So in this case, right, as you can see on the screen, right, this run transaction, I initiate a transaction. And within this transaction function, right, I actually fetch a document from the database. And then I process this data, right? I try to figure out what should be the latest newly updated data that this document should have before I update it. So in the event that while running this transaction, right, someone else tries to access the same document and edit the same document between the get and the update, right, this entire run transaction function will actually be void and rerun itself again, right? So it's very intuitive in a sense, very easy to implement this. And another thing that blew my mind, right, when working with Firestore is the thing that it's very easy. Firestore actually comes with offline persistent support. So what this means, right, is that when you are online, right, and you fetch data from Firestore, right, Firebase actually caches a copy of the data that you're using, so that even if you get disconnected, right, or your app goes offline, right, you can still access the data and manipulate it. And why I say manipulate, right, is literally manipulate, right? You can write, read, listen to, and query the cache data. So when your device, okay, so even if you're offline, you can actually run transactions. And when your device actually comes online later on, right, Cloud Firestore actually synchronize any local changes made by your app to the Cloud Firestore backend. And I have sort of like an example over here. So as you can see, this device isn't currently connected to the internet, right? But I'm like editing a message. So you see, ha 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 mukata is an edited message. So on the right, is when I actually activate, on my Wi-Fi, and then I enter the app again. And then you see, ha 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 mukata is updated. Wow! So it's like mind-blowing, the fact that you don't really need to write your own stuff. So okay, so moving on, we have push notifications, which is also very, very important when you're writing your own chat application. So to make push notifications happen for our Flutter chat application, right, we'll be using two core Firebase services. The first one being Firebase Cloud Functions, and the second one being Firebase Messaging. So what Firebase Cloud Functions are, essentially, is that Firebase Cloud Functions, right, is a serverless tool that lets you automatically run backend code in response to events that are triggered by Firebase features and HTTPS requests. So for example, you can write your own script and upload it to Google's cloud environment, which runs upon creation of like a message document in order to carry out the logic to send out a push notification to a device. So using Cloud Functions, right, you can imagine how easy it is to actually build a serverless architecture around your Flutter application. And recently, there's actually been tutorials online, right, which teach you how to use Dart to write your Cloud Functions. So what this means, right, is that in a way, today, you can actually write a full stack application, front end and back end, using just the Dart programming language, which is quite sick, right? So aside from the Firebase Cloud Functions, right, we also have to use the Firebase messaging package for Flutter. And this package is pretty simple. What it provides, right, is basically just some boilerplate code, or provide some boilerplate code for you to enable and handle notifications. So I'll just quickly run through the code snippets. So it's pretty straightforward, just some boilerplate code to get your app started. But I guess what might be your point of interest is this on resume and on launch. So basically, you notice that there's a message thing being passed in, right? So this enables your app to be able to dynamically respond to different kind of notifications based on the kind of like payload you get from that notification. So if you like receive a notification from a certain person, you can open a chat with that person's data inside. So yeah, it's very intuitive as always. And of course, you have to first get the token, get the push token from the peer device. Then you can push it to the device. So this is again some very intuitive API that it provides. Okay, so this is like an example of a cloud function written in JavaScript. So what this basically does, right, is I'll just quickly run through. Because you can see, right, what this cloud function does is on creation of like a message document, right? I process the data, I determine what kind of payload I want to send out, and then I just send out the payload to the device with that push token, the relevant push token. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so now we move on to security, which is also very important when building a chat app, because you don't really want anyone and everyone to be able to just like read and edit anyone's message documents, right? Because privacy is key. So one thing that you might be, okay, so one thing that's interesting is, one thing you might be thinking about is, it seems that throughout our entire app, right, we can just be writing transactions to our Firestore database without any form of authentication, right? We are doing transactions directly from the client. So where is that layer of security, right? And the thing is, Firebase was actually built with serverless architecture in mind. So they actually have that covered for us. And the secret sauce, right, is actually Firebase authentication. And what Firebase authentication is, right, is basically Firebase's authentication services that allows users to log into your Flutter app using things like mobile phones, email, Facebook, Google, etc., right? And the thing is, when you actually log in the user, right, using Firebase authentication, right, when you make any request to Firestore through the Firestore package, right, all your requests to the Firestore database, right, is already authenticated in a sense. So yeah, so some things that I forgot to mention is that aside from security, right, the Firebase authentication is very useful because when you register a user, right, you already have like the particulars already ready with very few lines of code. So if you are signing up through mobile, then obviously your Firebase user will automatically have their mobile number, or if you're logging in through Google, then you'll have their email as well. Then another cool part, right, is this idea of caching the user. So if you come from a web development background, right, usually when you receive like a web authentication token from your server, if you're using React, for example, you might probably like save that token in like your local storage or something, and do some logic, right, such that this token will persist even if you refresh the browser, etc., etc. But the thing about using Firebase authentication, right, is that even if you queue your app, right, and then you open it up again, when you create an instance of Firebase authentication, and then you call the method current user, even if you previously queued your app, right, you can still fetch the user again, right, and basically determine whether or not user is logged in lah. So this really abstracts away a lot of like the boilerplate code that typically we write in order to manage like persistent authentication in a sense. And yeah, so aside from that, of course, we're talking about security. So again, when you're making requests to Firestore, right, requests are actually already tagged to the user for authentication. So what do I mean, right? When you create like a Firestore database, right, you actually have to write some security rules, and these security rules will govern what kind of users have access and what kind of write or read access to what kind of documents. So the part which might be of interest is this part, basically the message part lah. So if you're already logged into Firebase authentication and you make a request, right, actually this request.auth.uid is already provided within that request, and you can cross-check it with whether or not the message, right, was sent by either him or sent to him. And if it's true, then you can read it, right? And if you are the creator of that message, then obviously you can delete it or edit the message, right? Yeah. And then of course, if you are not the user, then you cannot like create messages on his behalf lah. So it's very intuitive to write this kind of like write access or read access on using Firebase security rules. Yeah. So I would like to stress the importance of writing these rules if you happen to want to use Firestore, because recently there's a bit of a hoo-ha about how a lot of developers, right, when they use Firebase, right, or use Firestore, they don't really write the rules properly. So in theory, right, as long as you have like the API endpoints, you can just anyhow read like anything and just destroy the entire database. So be sure to write your security rules properly. So aside from security rules, because it's a chat app, right, so since it's a chat application, naturally we'll be paranoid, right? What if people actually get our Firebase login credentials, right? So maybe you can use AES encryption, which is what I usually do when I have to implement like a chat feature. So using the AES encryption standard, right, everything that you upload to Firestore will be encrypted, and then you basically fetch the encrypted messages, and then using some global security key from elsewhere, maybe a microservice, then you can decrypt it on the client side. So personally, I use the encrypt package to do it lah. And then, as you can see, it's very easy to just write some helper functions or some lines of code to decrypt and encrypt messages lah. Yeah. Just one thing to note lah. There are two things when you want to use like AES encryption. The first thing is that you have a super secret key, which only you and the peer should have access to. So if you want to do like client to client encryption, right, then you don't store that super secret key anywhere lah. Right. Once you share that key, you destroy it. And the hacker anyone who tries to access the database should never have access to this. But then on the other hand, there's this thing called initialization factor. So this initialization factor, right, is dynamically created every time you try to run a transaction. So you have to send this IV key to Firestore as well. So in other words, right, just take note that in theory, right, the attacker will have access to your IV and the encrypted content. But as long as he doesn't have your super duper secret key, all is good, right? The IV basically creates some kind of like randomization to make it very difficult to crack your encryption, even if they manage to like decrypt one message, right? Because of the IV key that's randomized with every transaction, with every single document, right? You cannot crack the rest of the messages. So IV keys are important, but they can be shared. Okay, moving on to user presence. So user presence, what I mean by that is, storing like whether or not the user is online or offline. So in order to make this happen, right, we will be using Firebase real-time database. So one thing you might be wondering is, okay, why use Firebase real-time database instead of Firestore? So one thing to note, right, when you're using Firestore is that we are actually charged based on usage. We're actually charged per write, per read, per delete. So for something like user presence, right, when the peer or your user, right, whenever they minimize the app, it counts like an offline. When you maximize the app again, when you open the app again, it is an online, right? So basically, if you use Firestore, there's going to be a lot of writes if the user just goes offline, online, offline, online. So we really want to do that, right? Because money is limited. So you can use real-time database where we are charged based on bandwidth. And the thing about the Firebase real-time database is that the how you stream and how you write data is very similar to Firestore. The syntax is very similar. So very little friction between going between the two. All right, so another thing that you might want to use is this mixin that Flutter provides called Windows Binding Observer. So like I mentioned, when you minimize the app, right, you have to create some way for the app to know whether or not the user has minimized or maximized it or opened up the app. So this Windows Binding Observer listens to that status, and whenever something changes, right, as you can see in this code snippet over here, right, you can update the Firebase database value right, based on whether or not you have opened the app or paused the app. And yeah, so personally, how I do it is I create like a empty widget. So this widget returns like a sizeboard, which is like invisible widget and I just plug this widget in like in a column on any screen that basically where I want to listen to the status of the user Yeah, and so this is like an quick example of it being in action. So user presence, right? So yeah. So as I open the app, close the app, open the app, close the app, right? On the other end, my peer who is listening to my user status will get reflected accordingly. So that's pretty cool. It's real time. So just a disclaimer, right? Actually, the Firebase real-time database actually provides a status or a node, right, where data is actually stored by the user being online or offline. However, there's a lag time before a user actually disconnects after minimizing the app, because the disconnect is not immediate, right? Once you minimize the app, right, it actually takes a while for it to be officially disconnected. So typically, if you use this, right, there's going to be some lag time before your user status gets reflected. And that is the reason why I manually change the values using the widget Windows Binding Observer. Yeah, so one thing you take note of. Okay, so now since we have a little bit of time left, I'll just like to share a bonus section, display pictures, right? So why I say it's bonus is because it's not exactly tied into Flutter or the Firebase storage package per se, but it is a very useful tool to consider since when you're building a social network of sorts, because display pictures So what I mean, right, is that typically you want to like zoom in on when you upload a photo and you want to have like a thumbnail, you want to zoom in on the face. So traditionally, it's very hard to do that without using any external services, because the face can be anywhere on the image. So basically what I do is what I discovered is actually it's very easy to connect Cloudinary, right, to a third-party storage solution. So it can be Google Storage or it can be like S3 or whatever. But once you hook them out, right, by creating some very simple documents in your storage, right, is that when it's hooked up, you can actually create a very simple helper function, right, where you put like Cloudinary prefix the Cloudinary URL, right, and then you just attach a query encoded Google Storage public URL, and then what is returned is actually a URL that generates like the kind of image that you want. So for example, what I sometimes do is like crop face thumbnail, so you can see it's very nicely cropped right. The face is the image, the photo is like a rectangle, but it actually cropped out a circular image with the face as the center, just like that, right? Super, high tech. And the thing about Cloudinary is that it provides some fun tools like pixelation as well, right? So so basically Cloudinary also provides some image manipulation tools such as pixelation. So they just pixelate just the face, which is pretty high tech but with so little effort. Okay, so this is something that you might want to consider when you're using Firebase storage or S3 and you want to do some image manipulation. You can write some helper functions using the Cloudinary API, which is quite cool. So I guess that's the end of my presentation. Hope this is of help to you guys. If you have any questions, then just comment. Then I'll just reply. Okay, thanks.
All right. So thank you, Zong Han.
Thank you.
So I guess there's like a couple of only one question. If you guys have any questions, please type down in the YouTube live stream. If you're inside, or if you're in Facebook, type it down also. All right. So there's one question from the viewers, right?
Yeah.
So is this app in production?
Oh, okay. So this particular app that I showed you, right, is some of a client app that I'm working on now. So we're going to push this out this week. But that said, because I mentioned I previously ran a tech startup. So for that startup, we actually had to implement some live chat functionality as well, where we connect students together and solve math problems lah. So for that feature, we also implemented a live chat using the same technologies mentioned here. So if you're concerned about scalability, I guess one thing that I read out on was that Firebase scales horizontally in a sense. So even as traction of your app increases, right, your volume increases, the speed of the queries and the writes will still be constant speed. Like it won't affect, there won't be any lag time. If that's what you're concerned about, like scalability. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's a very production ready solution. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, shout out to Firebase.
Yeah.
All right. So next question I would say from David Tran is that if the app got success, how easy is it to migrate or integrate with other services? So have you, like, for example, used AWS with Firebase, or do you have any? Yeah.
Okay, well, let me think. Okay, so for previously, before I used cloud storage, right, I didn't use AWS, but I used Cloudinary for my for image storage prior to Google Cloud Storage. So I guess these kind of services actually provide some API endpoints for you to call, right? So you basically just need to upload the image to that endpoint, and then you just upload normally. So I guess even though I haven't really used the native Cloudinary plugins or native AWS plugins for Flutter, I guess it should be quite easy to write your own in a sense. You get what I mean? Like API, like just submit a file to an API endpoint.
So I guess it's just like more towards piecing all the pieces together.
Correct.
So for myself, I think also that I didn't use a lot of these kind of services, but more or less Firebase and other services or API services is just piecing it together. So I have another question from Johnson. Yup. And this is, I guess, because of your experience as a CTO in a startup or a tech lead. What skills and knowledge would you recommend to be equipped with being a tech lead?
Okay, so some context. I guess, okay, so personally, right, I started developing apps 3 years ago. So I did like web dev for about 2 years. Then it was in October 2018 2019, sorry. This is 2020. So last year, October, when my startup wanted to build a native client, then I picked up Flutter to build the app. So in a sense, what I'm trying to say is that I think I'm very noob at building applications. But because of modern technology at Flutter, right, you can get the entire setup running very fast. So skills and knowledge wise, I guess
adaptability.
Just learn whatever you need to do. Yeah, when you have like a requirement that comes out of nowhere, then you just go and adapt and learn accordingly. Yeah. But I guess the transition is nowadays to become a tech lead is quite easy in a sense. Yeah.
So I guess in summary, would you say like being adaptable and really just diving into the what do you call that, the framework and tech? So no fear, and just being adaptable. All right. So I think you've already asked this kind of question. I think you've already gone through, but maybe you can refresh some people's memory. How do you optimize Firebase cost? Cost be cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So I did consider this a few times. So one thing is user presence, right? So user presence, how I solved that was using Firebase real-time database right? Instead of using Firestore, things that consist of like a lot of writes. You want to use a separate service. Another thing is perhaps like, okay, so personally, right, if I'm not dealing with real-time data, if I'm not dealing with data, it needs to be streamed in real time, right? I use MongoDB for all of my other like database needs. So that takes away a lot of cost as well. Another thing is in the context again of a chat application, if you are doing things like editing messages, reading messages, right? So once you fetch a message, right, then you want to mark it as read. So it cannot be like every time I send out a message, right, I mark it's originally unread. Then once I receive, then I write again. I do another write to make it read. So in a way, when you send out one message, right, it's basically going to be 2 writes, right? So it's times 2. So how I personally solved that was basically I have another Firebase value called current chat that the user is in. So basically, when the user is currently in the same chat as you, right, you can listen to that Firebase value, right? I didn't use a string builder for that. I use like a listener, which is very easy to attach in Flutter, right? And if the user is already in the chat, then you just like minimize the number of writes by marking it as read since the user probably is going to see it, he's in the chat right now. So that greatly reduces the number of writes required for me. Yeah, so I guess it really depends on the context as well. Just be mindful that you want to minimize the number of writes, I feel. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess like Firebase is free for a certain amount of reads and writes, right? If I'm not wrong, per month, right?
Yeah.
So a chat app is a lot of
yeah,
writes.
definitely.
So yeah, keep in mind on that. And thank you for the suggestion. Just a very simple, I guess, is it like a Boolean or
like string, like what's the chat ID the user is in?
Right. So a simple chat ID update. Right. Okay, that's cool. So I think that's about it for the questions.
All right, thank you.
All right. So we are going to move on to the next speaker, Suesi. So let me do a little transition. All right. So hi, Suesi.
Hello.
Okay. So can you give a short introduction about yourself?
Well, good afternoon. I'm Susie. I'm currently Android developer in Cognation in Melbourne, and that's my day job. My night job is Flutter lover because I'm not Flutter engineer yet, and because of my love with Flutter, is eventually lead me to be co-organizer at Flutter Melbourne here in Melbourne.
Right. So how's things in Melbourne so far?
At the moment, it's cold. And it's gloomy day today. But other than that, Flutter in Melbourne is still glooming as usual. It's like everywhere else.
Oh, that's great to hear. All right. So with that said, I'm gonna leave it to you with your presentation.
Sure. Thank you very much. So today I'm going to talk about the localization in Flutter. So when talking about localization, there will be a few aspects of localization. For example, the language, the culture is basically translating your app, your Flutter app into another language, another culture to attract more customers, more users for your app. So normally there will be 5 questions. First one, who is the target audience for localization? What to be taken care of when implementing localization? Where to find all the resources? When is a good time to start localizations, and why should we care of localization at all? Well, for the who, obviously people are from different cultures, and so language is not the only language. English is not the only language, even though most of the developers speak English very well, but other users, they don't. So by providing your application to different languages, you are able to tap to a wider range of audience and customers. That's what the business wants. What to be taken care of when you implement localization? I will have to say that the first thing is the language. That's the easiest way to translate your app into another, to tap into another new set of audience. But the language itself also contain of the grammar of the each language. So for example, in Japanese, when you say someone has something, is different from in English, you say the same thing. So the orders of the word will be different, and the culture as well. Sometimes if you make a joke in one language, it means something else in the other language. Well, it may not be related to the app development, but that is what you will need to worry when you look at localization. I introduce over here some of the resources I use when I research for localization in Flutter. And the screenshot I'm showing over here is from flutter.dev, and they have one full session on the internationalize the app. So you can go to flutter.dev and search for localization, and you find all the information from there. apart from that, in medium.com and Pro Android Dev, there are a lot of articles explaining all the aspect of localization as well. You can get yourself being equipped in this. And when should you start implementing localization? My answer is as soon as possible. If your project is a greenfield project, you should plan for localization as the moment that you start your project, the moment that you start planning for the project. But if the project is not a greenfield project and the business requirement come anytime, do it at that time. Start it as soon as possible. There's for Flutter, most of the Flutter developer I met make a mistake that they use hard-coded string in the project, and it make them very hard to identify which strings are in English to replace it. And so my advice is do not do that. Separate your string into a different file and use reference to the string instead. And why should we care of localization at all? Hi. Why do you ask me this question? I really have to ask that because English is not the only language. So the more people you can meet by providing more languages is the more customer you can get for the business. And so, well, that's what the business want. Now, to implement localization in Flutter, luckily we have a plugin from IntelliJ that is available from Android Studio and also VS Code. So you can just install this plugin in your IDE and it's good to go. Apart from that, you also can use ARB tools, but ARB tools is quite troublesome compared to the plugin. So within this talk, I'm going to talk about how you can set up the plugin and show you how it actually works. I'm going to use Android Studio as an example. So the Flutter International plugin is available on both Android Studio and Visual Studio Code. So the first step, of course, you will have to install the plugin. I'm using Mac, so in the MacBook, you can go to Android Studio Preference and Plugin and search for Flutter International and just install it. In Windows, there will be Android Studio files and settings for Windows. And after you install it, you may need to restart your Android Studio for the plugin to take effect. The second step is to open your Flutter app, the Flutter project that you want to enable international localization, and you go to Tools, select Flutter International, and click on Initialize the project. After this step, you will see that there are a few files generated automatically added into your project. So you can see that the default ARB file is created. This default ARB file is always English when you create it. The second one is the generated L10, and that is the localization .dat file. This file is where your actual class is defined and the actual strings localization will be defined will be generated after you make changes to your ARB file. And in the pubspec.yaml, you will find that Flutter internal is also added to your pubspec.yaml, but you will need to make changes to your pubspec.yaml file because otherwise you can see on my screenshot over here, there are some errors because of the pubspec.yaml file is not being updated. So to resolve the error, you will need to add the international package into your pubspec.yaml. I will show it in my demo later. When you add your pubspec into your pubspec.yaml file, I really recommend you to change the class name, to define the class name, even though in the documentation, they say that the class name is optional and the default name is set to S. But I really recommend to change this class name to any project that you are referring to, because S, it just does not make sense to me. Finally, you will need to update your app because you will need to declare localization into your material app. So if you are using material app, you will have to declare localization delegate to use the localization generated delegate, and then you have to define the supported locales using the delegate locales. And lastly, if you need to use only one language, you can skip this step. Otherwise, you can start adding all your locales in to your project. So when you add the locale, you will go to Tools, Flutter International, and Add Locale, and you will have to add using the language code. You will need the language code in order to add the new locale into your project. So I'm going to show you a demo using Android Studio. And the link over here is where I publish my localization demo project on my GitHub. You can have a look. So here is my application. Is the localization demo. As I say, in the pubspec.yaml, you will need to add your Flutter International package. Without this package, your localization will still get error. And that is the error when you first initialize the localization and you get error in the generated files. Secondly, also add the class name. This class name will make the generated file localization file to generate the class name that I want. Instead of just an S, it will generate the my app localization. Then I will use this name across all the strings in the project. Okay, so my first step is to create the strings in international English ARB file. So the first strings is a very simple string. It's just a string with text. On the UI, you will see it run only this. This is a simple string. So the text is just a string with nothing else. And the string is just a JSON string for the ARB file is a JSON format. So you will have a key and a value. Corresponding to the English file, you will have also international file, ARB file in other languages, which is added when you add the tools international and add locale. In each of the ARB file, you can translate it. You can translate the string using the key and translate the value into the separate language. And when you run it on different language, you will see the same string will be shown in different languages. Okay. The beauty of ARB is that it uses the ICU format. So apart from just a simple string, this is the example. Here is the example of the string that receives 2 params in. So the number of params is up to you, but each of the params will be defined by the name that you first given to it. And the format is that it should be inside the curly bracket. Okay. So with this, during runtime, you can send the string in and it will update the string automatically. For example, over here, I will send my name in, and then I send my age in. When I click on it, it will show the strings in the Vietnamese language because this is running on the Vietnamese environment. Whereas in the English environment, when I enter my string, my name and my age, and I click, it will say hello to me in English. Okay, so over here I have 2 languages and the example show in 2 languages. And that is corresponding to the name and the age. This is when you open the international param in the generated file and you search for your key, it actually generates a string, a method return string, and it takes 2 objects, the name and the age. So when you use it in your code, you will use it like this. So the text will need to call the localization of context. You will need to send a context in, and it will, with the keyword, the method is the keyword in your string, and you need to send 2 params in corresponding to the name and the age. Okay. The next one is the string with selections. So Localization will provide you with simple selection, is like switch case in your strings, but in in localization is called select. So the format for select is that it will always need to be inside a curly bracket, start and end in curly bracket. The first word before the comma is the key, is the param name, and the select is the keyword to let ICU know that this is a select format. And next, you will have to define your strings for this is the key corresponding to the param that you send in. And so for example, over here, I send in a toy with which can be a car or dolls, and orders is a keyword. It means that if there's nothing, if you can't match with any of the key previously, use this phrase. So with this, the whole string here is a select. So when we translate it into other language, we only translate the mapping string. We do not translate the param name. We do not translate the key and other keyword. We only translate the text, the mapping text. And once we have this strings defined, it will be translated into the language.dat file, localization.dat file as a method which take in an object. And as you can see over here, it will translate it into a map from key to value. Okay. So normally I will use when I use with select, I normally use it with enum, because with enum the key will never change. So the example I have over here is that I create an enum of toys and of cars and dolls, and the cars are the name of the enum's value exactly match the name of the key I use inside the select statement. And with this, when I display it in the text, I will just send the value of the toys, send the value of the enum in. One thing I have to say is that the order will also include the case when the enum, the object is null value. So you don't need to worry about null value in here. And with the selection, so for example, over here I have three options. So one is cars, one is dolls, and one is orders. And in the English version, I have the same. And every time I click on one, they use the corresponding string phrase for that, and show on the screen. That is how this string selection work over here. And I don't need to worry too much about selection string for each of the toys. Lastly, the another ICU format that is supported by this Flutter International plugin is that is called the plural. So as you all know, right, in English when we speak and we use the word, number one will come with a single, and more than one will be a plural word. So for example, if you say I have one dress, that will be just dress, and then I have multiple dresses, that will be dresses. So the grammar will be different, and for that, plural can be useful in one of that case, but it can be applied for all other cases as well. So over here, I use it as a counter with number 0. I say that you have not clicked the button yet. And when it's number 1, I say you have clicked the button one time without S. And then orders, meaning that 0 and 1 is already taken care of. Orders is any other number. It will show that you have clicked the button how many times, right? And with this, similar to the select, you only translate the mapping string. You do not translate all or any other keys, especially the param name, the keyword for plural, 0, 1, and order. And when you do a translation, here is the part that you will translate only the mapping string. So with this, when you use it in, I will show the localization first. When the file is generated, when the string is generated, it will generated as plural, and plural will define is as 0, 1, and orders. And if you check the plural, they actually have a few other keywords, and if you have any of these keywords in your string, they will be used to map into the strings and give it back to you during runtime. So when you use it, similarly, you have to send in a number. This is a number, and as we all know, number include integers, double, and also float. But if you send in a float, it will be treated as orders. So most of the time, you will have to send only numbers in here, float or double. Integer in here will be matched exactly into the plural map. But if you send double or float, you may always get the counter, the string from the order part. So here is how it looked like. Let's say I have the same app with two languages, Vietnamese and English. And the first one is the Vietnamese. I have not clicked the button anytime yet. So you will see this string. You have not clicked the button yet. Now I click the button one time. And this you have clicked the button one time will be translated automatically to the Vietnamese when your app is running in the Vietnamese environment. And key is when you click on the button more than 2 times, and you will get this. Okay. Now, with a little bit more complex, you can try to merge the strings between select and with param. So you can use your imagination and go wide with it. But the example I show over here is only to combine select with param. So you can define a select string, and then within the string, you can give the params to it. And when the generated file, that file is created, you can look at it this way. It will generate the complex file, the complex strings as method, and it will take the object toys, which is the param for the select, and it will take two other params, origin and name. If you don't want the params to be ordered like that, to be in that order, you can change it using the placeholder. There are a lot of interesting stuff going on for this ICU format, so you can do your own research on it. I promise it's really fun. So let me show you how it looks like. This is a demo for the complex string, so I can enter my name here, and I can enter my age here. And let's say I want to play with cars, then they will tell me that your name is Susie, you're 60 years old, and you love to play racing car. That's a very weird lady, but right, that's me. Or I can prefer to play dolls. So they say hi to me as your name is Susie, you are 60 years old, and you love to dress up dolls. I know. Okay, so I hope with all of this, it will actually give you motivation to try to translate your app into multiple languages and try to reach out to more wider range of audience for your app.
All right. So thank you, Susie, for that presentation about internalization. Wow, that's a lot of customization that you can do. Okay, so I have a couple of questions from the live stream. So if you guys have any questions, whether you are on the YouTube live stream or Facebook, comment inside the live stream. So let me start with the first one. First question by David Tran. So how does it support unit test?
Well, to be honest, the support of unit test does not really work over here. And I believe that when the plugin is ready enabled, the unit test ready done on the plugin side. So the unit test on your app side will focus on your own logic, and it does not actually give any special support on the unit test.
Unit test.
Yeah.
So unit test is not, it's not possible in the testing side, but it's already implemented in the plugin.
Yes, that is my assumption, because so
Right.
far until now, I can't really do any logic test with the strings.
Right. So it's more towards like your own manual test to see whether the strings are correct.
Yes.
All right. Okay. All right. So next question by David Tran himself also. So does it support multiple files of the same language? Yeah. So he's asking because as the app grows, there might be thousands of keys and values.
Well, sadly, no. For each of the language, you will have only one file, unless
Right.
you can separate the file by. No, the separate is based on the region, but the language, no. So each of the region, you still have to keep the same pair of keys and value. If you don't keep the same pair of keys and value, if that pair of keys and value are missing in your language implementation, Flutter will use the default pair of language and pair of key and value from your default files.
Right. Yeah. So I had some experience with the internalization or localization package. Yes, it is also one file, and it's gonna be huge if you have a lot of text. So, but luckily you have IDEs that has smart search, so that is no problem. But in terms of like having it clean code, it's not there yet, I would say. So hopefully, maybe in the future, the Dart team or Flutter team has more support on multiple files. Right.
That'd be
So
great.
that'll be great. I think that's about it. I myself don't have any questions, but I learned a lot about like the plurals and then like the other objects that you can use with the internalization package. That's like so cool because I didn't know you can put in like your own what do you call that, values, and then it will be translated on the fly, which is great. Yeah. All right, so I think that's about it for questions. Thank you, Susie. And let's do the transition. Bye-bye. All right, so the last speaker is myself, and I'm going to host myself. So, all right, so I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Haris. Okay, like for example, there's a host right at this side. So, hi, Haris. Wait. Hi, Haris. How are you? Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. So, what do you do, Haris? I'm currently working for myself. I'm building a learning platform for Flutter. And then at the same time, I'm creating YouTube videos and Udemy courses. Wow, that's great. Yeah, thank you. So anyway, today what I'm going to share with you guys is this dot null safety feature. And basically, what this is just another feature that's being implemented inside the Dart programming language. Hopefully, in the future, you can use it in your Flutter projects. So, this presentation is based on this Medium article that's written by Philip and Michael, and it's called Announcing Sound Null Safety. So, it has been in technical preview in the previous, like maybe few weeks, right? Or few days actually. And I'm just going to share why I guess we need null safety and how you're going to use the new feature. All right, but before that, I want to introduce you to this $1 billion mistake. So, for those who don't know what this $1 billion mistake, it was created by Tony Hoare, and he basically prioritized run code quickly over safety checks. So the problem back then was that people didn't want to manually check all of the machine code, right? So he was thinking, how can he actually make these checks faster? So then in the end he says that, okay, why not we just not prioritize safety checks and put in some null reference in order for it to not like have any errors, right? But little did he know that actually having a null reference actually allows programs to compile and crash on runs, allow memory leaks, and worst of all, cause security issues in the code. And at the same time, because he was because of the programming language C, right? They got the inspiration from him. So in their get function, they introduce also the null reference, which also introduces malware creation. So that get function, you can override the return value by just having this null feature. So in the end, this kind of errors actually accumulate to $1 billion. So viruses, if you guys have known, it shut down systems. And there was once, I forgot what event was it, but there was this malware that shut down a system, and then basically tons of companies unable to run their online businesses, and it was estimated to cost $4 billion in terms in the economy of the damage itself, right? Oops. Yeah. So that's why you can read more. Definitely, I will have the link up in the future videos. But yeah, you can read up on this, and that's why having now reference in historically is not really a good idea. So why now safety? So if the $1 billion mistake doesn't convince you, then I would say that why we should implement, or why it is implemented in Dart, because Dart is a type safe language, but that type safety does not guarantee a variable to have not a null. So for those who have coded out Flutter apps, right, and then you have suddenly null value, and then you like, oh my god, I didn't think of what I should return when there's null value in a function, for example. So personally, for myself, I've faced a lot of this, I would say, errors and debugging sessions, right? So for example, a simple function that you create, a function that's called print length, where it will require you to have a list of strings, and it's called names, right? So it's a very simple for in loop where it will just run through the list of strings, and then it will print out the different names length, the string length, right? So what are the two ways can this null f this up, right? So there are two ways. The first way is that if you were to put in a null value, then it will just cannot run now, because you can't run a for in loop with null. It's not possible. It's like saying 1 divided by 0. It's yeah, okay, don't try that. Next is that if you were to have a list and then you have strings, but one of the elements, right, is null. So there are times where sometimes you have a list of data and then there's null. And then I was like, oh no, how am I going to deal with this null value? So sometimes we forget about how we are going to catch these null cases, right? So then this will give an error at the same time, because null.length doesn't, it will just shout an error. So with this, type safety doesn't really make sense. So because that also promotes sound, so basically like sound make in simpler terms, it basically means makes sense, right? So you expect a variable to not have a null value, because if I were to create a variable that's called number, and then suddenly you give me a null value, it's kind of like, why? So what is sound? So sound is basically the vibration in the air that we can hear. Just kidding, just kidding. So sound in Dart, or the sound type system, means you can never get into a state where the expression evaluates to a value that doesn't match what you have already implemented in a variable. So that's why a sound type system will make what you create make sense. So what I mean by that is, for example, the first one, we have a variable called number. And then if we were to overwrite the number into into a boolean, not a boolean, sorry, into a float, right? Then it will actually have a static check error. So if you were to type it into .pad, or if you were to type it into your IDE, right, this actually causes an error, because the variable number is inferred as an integer, not a float. But if you want to have like a dynamic kind of variable that consists or that accepts both a double or integer, then you can point the second example, which is the variable called digit, and then you can put the type as num. So num accepts both double and integer. So if you were to just initialize it with integer and then suddenly you just want to put a float, and then yeah, it accepts. So you don't have any static type errors, right? So for example, if you were to have this null safety, I'm going to explain in terms of giving a present, right? So your a-hole friend gives you a present, and in that box, or we call it a variable, is empty. But you didn't know. You don't know that the present is empty. So the empty is representing as null. And then when you open the box, you feel shortchanged because you expect your present or that box present, right, to have something in it, but it's nothing. So you ask your friend, why do you give me an empty box? And your friend say, it's still valid one. So your static type checker says null is valid one. Null is a value for your variable that you assign to. Then I'm like, no, it's gonna give me more errors. Oh my god. So that's why we have null safety. So if there was null safety, you can see whether the present has a chance to be empty. So I will explain more what is nullable variables and such. So now when you see the present, you know there is a chance that it can be empty or null, right? So if you were to see that present, you can punch your friend in the face. All right, so should you migrate your code where the null safety feature actually comes in, or actually currently can you do that? So currently you can't use the feature in your Flutter apps because I've tried it. The only way you can do it is you have to fork this project, and then you have to manually use the dot language or the version that is inside the what do you call that, technical preview version, or I would say the dev channel, right? So if it was already implemented stable already, I would say not necessarily if you have a current project, because the Dart team has made this feature backward compatibility. So that means, right, if you have your current project and then you wanted to use the null feature that's using the Dart programming language, right, it won't break your app basically. So don't need to worry, don't need to panic. All's good. So thanks to the Dart team and the Flutter team. So in the future, should you implement null safety in your project? And I would say definitely, because with the null safety feature, it is going to make your projects to have less bugs. Who here loves more bugs? The person who like more bugs is a little bit, cuckoo. At the same time, it's optimized because now you have, variables that won't return you null, and then you don't have to check for null, so you have less code to write, and then basically you're going to optimize. So this is very good for users who are a baby, because we refer to them as that. So how do I learn null safety? So one way you can do is to go to the nullsafety.pad.dev, which is a website that has .pad exercises that you can go through, which I am going to go through. So no, not thank you, sorry. All right, so I'm going to go through the .pad exercises, only a couple of them. So let me see. Okay, all right. So I'll go through these three nullable types: promotion and late keyword. Also, another thing is also circular reference, right? All right, so let's go to the null safety.pad.dev. So once you go into this website, it will look something like this. And then if you were to click on this learn with snippets, there's a lot of exercises that you can go through. So I'm going to go through a couple of them. So the first one, nullable types. So in the actual .pad, if you were to have this right on the current Dart version or the Dart programming language, it actually doesn't show any errors, right? But with null safety, right, you could see that this integer a, it is something that is considered non-nullable. So what it means by non-nullable is that you cannot assign this variable called a with the value null. But if you want to, for some reason, you want to have to assign the variable a as the null value, then you can make it into a nullable variable. So currently this is a non-nullable variable. In order for us to make it nullable, you put the question mark. So this question mark, now you could see that this a variable is a is a nullable variable, as you can see from this integer question mark over here. So with this, now you can print the statement A is null. So if you were to run this, and there you go, A is null. So if I were to go to .pad, right, and if I were to just go to the void main without this, and then I will just paste it over here. And at the same time, you could see there's no like null checks, which is kind of okay, I mean, for now, but this will give you some null errors in the future. So having this null safety, personally, you will save a lot of trouble. So the next thing is that we're going to go through more nullable types. So we have different variables that we've initialized, a list of strings, a nullable list of strings, and a list of nullable strings. So for the first variable, a list of strings, you have a valid list of strings that is basically a string of the number 1, 2, and 3. So you can print out this normal list, right? But the second one is a nullable list of strings. That means this variable, it will just initialize it as a null value. So where are we going to put this question mark? So in order for us to make this a nullable variable, what we can do is we can put the question mark right after the element type here. So you could see that list over here is the element, sorry, this list over here is the variable type, and this okay, sorry about that. So the element type usually is basically represented as the pointy thing over here, and then you have this question mark. So this question mark will always refer to the outer of the pointy string. So that's why there is no error over here. And then lastly, you will have this a list of nullable strings. So previously in our example, we had a null value in our list of strings, but now we have this variable. How are we going to resolve this error? So if I were to put this question mark as what we have put it in our previous variable, then you can see that the error is not going away. So basically what I've explained is that if you were to put outside the pointy brackets, right, this means that the variable that we initialize the list, right, is going to be nullable, but we want to have the element to be nullable. So what we can do is we can put the question mark inside the element type. So with that, now no errors has been shown, and if you were to run this, everything is okay. So it might be a little bit tricky if you were to have, you know, element types, or you have like map string dynamic, and then you want to have both null for some reason. So make sure you understand how you going to put that question mark. All right, the next thing is I'm going to talk about promotion. So I'm not going to promote you into a higher pay, but this is a promotion that you're going to use inside your .pad null safety feature. So what is promotion? Basically, it is what we always wanted when we create functions. Because, for example, over here, it is a simple function called get length. So it only gets the length of the string that you have going to pass in inside this function, which is going to return an integer, right? So this is just an innocent function that we usually create. However, if we know that the string that we're going to pass in is going to be null, we're going to put this, you know, question mark. So how are we going to, with this null safety checks, right, we can actually have an error message that says, all right, so you put the string variable as a nullable variable, right? So that means you need to put null check, which is great because we need that person, that friend that always says, right, this is, you are missing something. So that's why we're going to put this null check, and that's basically promotion. What it does is it basically checks all of the lines of code, and if you were to put a nullable variable, then it will show an error that says, okay, you must have something that returns when you have a null that's passed into the function, which is great. So in order for us to resolve this problem, what we can do is we can type in a very simple if statement. So if string is equal to null, and then we are going to return a 0. So we just type in return 0. the number 0, not the string 0. All right. So with that said, now you don't have the error. And this is great because not only for experienced developer like us, where we definitely will forget if there wasn't any like null checks, but for beginners who are going to create functions and that they don't know that you need to have some null check if you were to have like, variable that you're going to pass inside the function. So with that said, if you were to run this, then this is going to be 17. So if I were to put the get length as null, as you can see over here, right? So I'm going to pass in a null inside the get length function. And if I want to run it, then you can return 0. So most of the time, we developers always forget there will be like null that's going to be passing into the function. All right, so now let's go through this promotion with exceptions. So exceptions is basically like error message that you can modify, right? So same thing, right? So let's put in an exception. So we are going to resolve this by having a if statement to check whether the string is null. And then at the same time, you are going to throw an exception. So exception. And then inside this exception, this is an object that returns an error, or you can also add in your own message. So it is a string. And then you can type in, for example, string is null. All right. So I put a semicolon. And then if you were to run this, you can see that your custom error message comes out. So for myself, I would like to make it more specific on what kind of function where my string, or I would say string param is null. So I would say get length string params is null, right? So to make it more obvious, so because when you want to debug your code, right, you have no idea what this error means. So getting it to be more specific will help inside your debugging experience as well. So when you put a null, you definitely know that someone or a use case that you forgot or overlooked is where the exception, like you know exactly which function is throwing this exception or error. All right. So the next one that I'm going to go through is this thing called late circular reference. All right. Wait, let me see if I'm forgetting anything. So let me go back. So there is another thing that's called the late keyword, right? So I think most of us are usually late for our meetings, but that's fine. And the thing is, when should you use this late keyword, or what this late keyword basically do? So in its essence, late keyword basically say that, okay, so for this variable, it's not initialized first, so you don't have to initialize it. So it's used mostly inside object creation. And usually what you will tell that is that you aren't going to assign it right away. So, and then at the same time, you're going to assign it the value later. So basically an object, and then after that, you'll make sure that it's assign a value before it's accessed. So an object or class that you create, for example, a meal, and then you have your field called description. And the thing is, if you were to put inside the normal Dart programming language, this will be fine. However, now with the null safety check, this says that, okay, you need to assign this a variable, a value. So if you were to like have this error, you probably like, okay, so why not I just put an empty string? So the thing is that this might not be good because for some developers, this might not be like a good practice. So good, and also at the same time, it's expensive because you're going to initialize this meal description with an empty string. So why not optimize it, right? So late is more towards optimizing it, and by putting the keyword late. So with this right now, it says to the Dart programming language, they say, okay, so this description field, I'm going to initialize it later. So now with this meal, right, at the same time, it has a method that's called set description. So it takes in a string, basically a setter method that overrides the current description with the string that is passed into the method. So for example, inside your main method, you create an instance of a meal, and then you're going to set the description as I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but you are going to basically initialize the current description, or you're going to set the description of your instance, right? And then you're going to print it out. So if you were to run this, yeah, it works. So with this, it actually helps with optimization. And the next one is maybe this may be familiar to you guys, where you have like circular references. So circular references means that you have two objects referring to each other. So how are you going to remove that case where it's like, okay, what if one of it is not initialized, right? So with this, right, you're going to put in the late keyword. So where are we going to put the late keyword? Can you put the late keyword with a final? So let's check it out. So I'm going to type in the word late final quotes. Right. So that means you actually can put the late keyword with the final keyword as well. So this doesn't like have any more errors now, because now we know that we are going to initialize it later. And this is how it goes. So you have like a team object and a coach object, and both of them are referring to each other because it makes sense. You in a team you have a coach, and in a coach you have a team. So you create instance of both a team and coach, and then you refer to both of them. And then once you are done, you can run this, and then great. So all is done. So this is really something that I think might be familiar to some of you, or might be interesting to some of you guys as well. All right. And last and but not least, late and lazy, which we are right now in this weekend. We are lazy and late for most stuff. So with this, right, I really want to showcase on how this late and lazy actually helps you to optimize your code. If you were to, for example, run this thing, and okay, before running this thing, actually it runs for us, but we have here a simple private function. So usually when you want to create something private, you probably get a room, or you just put a underscore, so to represent that a function or variable is what do you call that, private in its own scope. So you have a compute value over here that prints out computing value and returns a number 3, right? And then you have a class or an object that is called a cached value provider. So basically, like maybe you have some cache and you don't want to initialize it at first, right? And then you have this final cache where you use this compute value that you have created over here. So this cache will be assigned to the value 3, and then you have a getter method that returns the current cache, which is called value. So inside this main method, we have this print statement that says calling constructor. And then you will create an instance of the object called provider using the cache value provider object. And then you will print this getting value, and the value is provider. So if you were to look over here, if I were to run this, right, you will, yeah, it makes sense, right? So the first one, the print statement, it says calling constructor. And then the second one, because you create this instance of an object, you actually you actually run this function called compute value, and then you will run this print statement, and that's why you see the computing value at the second statement. And then the third print statement is getting value, makes sense. And then the fourth statement is basically trying to get what is the provider value. Now, if we were to put the late keyword into our cache over here, because currently it's not being initialized, being referred at the end over here, provider.value, right? So we can put this late keyword. And now if we were to run it, and what is it? What is going to be the difference in this print statement? I'll give you a hint. It has to do with computing value and getting value. So let's run this. And now if you see the computing value and the getting value, it actually swaps. So getting value is actually called first. Why is that so? Because, right, due to this late keyword, we are not actually calling this compute value, because we are not referring to the value until we do this print statement. So it just temporarily makes it will just does not run this final variable, this cache inside this cached value provider object that you have created. And then after that, it says computing value, and then this computing value will only be run once we refer this dot value. So that's great, because what if we are not referring to any what do you call that, properties of an object, right? Then this will not run anything at all. So this is a very cool feature that I think most of you guys will do as well. So I think that's about it for this demonstration. So I did not go through the other one. So you have like definite assignment. I gone through the late circular assignment and late and lazy. So I missed out the definite assignment. Sorry about that. So that's about it for this dot now safety. So I actually am very excited for this now safety feature to come out, because like when you create your apps in the future, it's going to be definitely less buggy, and you definitely will know what you can actually what do you call that, get, because when you get a value, you know that it's going to be either a nullable value or non-nullable value. So thank you for this. And all right, so wow, there's a lot of questions, I guess. All right, so void main xy string is, so David Tran, let me answer your question first. Void main integer x string y equal x to integer print y is non-nullable. It's non-nullable. It prints y. So for the y variable, right, is non-nullable. This one also works. So you have to go to the null safety, right? So I haven't gone through definite assignment. Okay, let me go through definite assignment. Okay, basically it's, so this is assertion basically. So you have a nullable value, right? And the thing is that if you want to assign a non-nullable value into a nullable variable, right, what you can do is to put an exclamation mark. So for example, you have this could return null but doesn't. So you have a function could return null but doesn't, and then this is a nullable variable. But for this integer a is a non-nullable variable. So what you can do is you can actually put an exclamation mark. So that means that, okay, so this will definitely return me a non-nullable value. So because for this function, you know that it only returns -3. So that is, so for that example, right, it will not work in the new feature, but if you were to put inside .pet.def, it will definitely work, but inside the null safety feature, it will not work. So if you were to use this, then you will have to use this exclamation mark basically. All right, so let's see. So it's not really a bug. Let me see. Next question by David Tran also. So integer a is equal to null, string b is equal to a dot to string. So the same thing is also right. You have to make the exclamation dot to string. Okay. So if you were to put dot to string, let me put this example. So if I were to put dot to string, it will not work because you have to put the exclamation mark so that it will convert to its, okay, and also at the same time needs to be a string as well. Sorry about that. Right. Okay, so okay, let me put this example over here. All right, so for example, for this string, oops, dot to string. Okay, let me see. So we have a non-nullable value, and then suddenly we have a nullable variable, and then we have this dot to string. So this will then make it into a string variable. So I think you're right. Sorry, if I got the question mixed up, right? So basically, when you put this into dot to string, right, this will actually just return you a string. It doesn't return you a nullable string. It will just return you the type string, right? So I think that's what you're trying to say if you were to put dot to string. So this works as well also, right? So I think it's not a bug further, right? Okay, yeah. If using, it might also crash if that value is now. If using this, it might, if that value is now. Yes, it will crash. So for this assertion operator, right, this is like a for side. If you think definitely this value, this non this nullable variable, right, is definitely going to return me a value, then it will just become okay. But if not, then you will have an exception, right? So this is I wouldn't, that's why I didn't go through this, because this means that you really are confident that the return value of a nullable variable is definitely going to be a value that's not null. So that's one thing that I will not try to use. I will probably use this feature sparingly, but in the end, this null safety will actually help make this kind of like foresight be less prevalent. Yeah, so you don't have to actually think about the use cases, because you know that if you were to use a non-nullable variable, you only get the non-nullable value as well. But yep, so that's about it. I think most of the questions are around the same. Let me see one more questions. So string x equal to null, integer y equal to x not null. For others, you have to add. Right, so you don't have to put the question mark. So there's another feature. Yeah, let me see. Is it conditional access, right? So there's another feature called conditional access. And basically in this example, x question mark dot length. So in the current dot thing, right? X question mark will return you a null. And then it will basically see the next thing, whether it is basically like return you a null and then dot something else. So this is something that we have to do. Do you know when this feature? I don't know. Okay, so basically what this conditional access does is that it will short circuit everything. So for example, you have this big thing, right? And then after that, so you have a big thing object that has a little thing object inside it. And this little thing object has a fetch integer method inside it, right? So now with the big thing as a instance of an object, you want to have this question mark over here, because you put this big thing as a nullable value. However, if I were to put this over here inside the dot pad, yeah, then it will have a like a non-nullable, sorry, this is this one. So it has this question mark, which basically if I were to run this will actually give me an error, because big question, oh, it doesn't return me a, sorry, it will not return me a 12. But if I were to, for example, have this big thing as null, right? And then if I were to, because you don't have any null safety check, right? This will actually gives me an error, right? Or it doesn't show me anything, because yeah. So by doing question mark and another question mark, it will return me null if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So because if you were to have a null value, you have to put 2 question mark, because you are expecting this big thing to be a null value. But with this null safety, then you can just short circuit everything, and then you don't need to have that 2 question marks. So this will be enough, right? So David, I don't know when this feature will go live, but it is inside the technical preview of the Dart programming language. Yeah, you can go to the Medium article, and it will show you how you can actually use the current tech preview inside the Dart Dev channel. So I will, the slides will be up. Well, I will share the slides later on. And is it difficult to migrate? So let me see. Is it difficult to migrate existing Flutter app to support type safety? Maybe if you have. So the thing is, you can't. So you can't migrate your existing Flutter app, because I personally tried it. Maybe I didn't try it correctly or not, but I tried to use the .dev what do you call that? The .dev code what do you call that? The current tech preview in a simple Flutter app, it doesn't really work. You have to put in some flags for it to work. So so for now, I think it is you can't really what do you call that, migrate it. But it is not difficult, because it is backward compatible. That means whether you use the null safety check or not, it is still okay. So they are going to build some tools for you to convert your current Flutter app into the null safety type. So you don't need to worry so much about that. So yeah, they're gonna have a migration tool to support in automating many of the steps to upgrade your existing packages and apps. So I would say not to worry so much, but I personally haven't migrated. All right, so I think that's about it for the questions. Okay, so I'm going to end this what do you call that? This live stream so far. And if you have any questions, yeah, you can leave it into the live stream. Yeah, so I think that's about it. Let me transition. Oh, at the same time, I want to have to showcase this Telegram group. Basically, if you are in Singapore or not, doesn't matter. You can join the Singapore Flutter group inside our Telegram. That's where we just talk about anything to do with Flutter. And then you can also go to our meetup page, Flutter Singapore. And yeah, so these are the two links that you can go to. And that's about it for now so far. All right. So, and hope you guys enjoy yourself. Let me do some transitions.